Welcome everyone to this session, part of the Festival of Learning 2024. We're really excited to have you here today with CAST. I'm Grace from London Funders and my colleague Aura is in the room as well, so just message us if you need anything. As hopefully you know, this festival is a really great opportunity for London Funders members to come together and share learning, ideas, and be inspired by others in the funding community and civil society. We've had a really packed programme across last week. We're still running more sessions today and tomorrow, and we've got the big festival finale on Thursday in person in London, and we'd love to see you there if you haven't signed up yet. And this year, the sessions have really kind of been categorised under 5 core themes. We've been looking at participation, process, equity, collaboration, and systemic change. So do have a look on the site if there are other sessions that interest you in that. We will be live tweeting today from at London Funders, at London Funders with the hashtag Festival of Learning 24. We'll drop that in the chat. So if you want to share any other learning on all your socials, please do join in the conversation. And just to let you know, we are recording today's session. And if there's anything you do not want us to broadcast, that's said any comments or anything, just drop myself or Aura a message and we'll make sure that's not shared. We'll have a presentation from our colleagues at CAST today, and then it'll be a discussion. So if you can come back on camera when that discussion bit is happening, it would be great to see all your faces, but understand you might not be able to. And we have closed captions on, and you can toggle them on and off on your own settings as well. So that is enough of me rambling. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our fabulous friends at CAST, Dan and Tori.
Thank you so much, Grace. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for signing up for this session and for joining us. Really looking forward to a conversation with you about the wonders and excitement and challenges of AI, particularly generative AI, and what it might mean for all of our work. So I'm Dan. I am the director of a charity called CAST. We used to be called the Centre for the Acceleration of Social Technology, but that's a silly name, so we're just called CAST now. But our work is all about supporting other social organisations figure out how to use digital data and design in their work, or more specifically, to figure out how we respond to the way in which technology is being used in all of the kind of the world around us and what that means for our work, whether that means adopting technologies or responding to them. I'm joined by my colleague Tori, who is on the call as well. We'll be jumping into the notes, into the chats and sharing some links. And later on, very excited that Alex Sutton from Trust for London will share some of the work that he's doing too. To begin with, I'm going to share my screen, going to kind of talk through the overview of the session. And fingers crossed it'll all work seamlessly, but if not, please jump into the notes. So I jump into the chat and we can make sure that you can engage with the whole session. Right, let's see if I can get this working. In time-honoured tradition, can you wave to me if that's working, please? Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. So I mentioned who CAST are and kind of the sorts of work that we do. The reason for our work is we think that the voice and the influence of civil society is really important, and that technology and technology companies are having a really significant impact on all of our lives, all of the lives of our communities. So we work to ensure that civil society organisations, charities, community groups, trusts and foundations are able to develop the kind of agency, their ability to use these tools and technologies, presence, that means kind of being involved in kind of creating and shaping them, and then influencing how these technologies affect us all. So hopefully today we can think about that lens with AI. What does it mean for how we might use it internally? What does it mean for how we might understand how these technologies are affecting us and our communities? And then what might we do to bring about the change, the positive change that we want to see? So the session for today, a very quick kind of overview of AI and the sector. We're then going to jump into a mirror board where I'm going to ask you to share some of your experiences and some of your interests. We're then going to think about some experiments that are going on already, particularly within trusts and foundations, and Alex is going to share some of his work. And then we're going to think about what kind of priorities might be for us as a group or us individually to make sure this is a practical session as well as hopefully an interesting one. But before we start, I would love you to either show your hands or, if you're off camera, just put a comment in the chat about whether you've used or played with or already experimented with generative AI in any way. Whilst doing that just gives us a flavour of kind of where you are on your understanding, whether you're just kind of beginning to explore this stuff or whether you're using it really confidently and a lot. Just as you're doing that, this image was created using generative AI, where the prompt I provided was, can you show me a picture of 3 people, one with their hands above their head, one with their hands above their waist, and one with their hands below their waist. It's a beautiful picture. It's not quite right. It's not quite aligned with what I asked the tools to do. And some of it, like the hands in particular, are a little bit weird. But there's something about kind of the power and opportunity that is shown through this photograph to me,
Yeah, is it me or Buffy?
but also some of the concerns that it's not quite as accurate as I would want it to be. Now, whilst you're kind of adding in some comments to the chat, and I'm going to jump into those in a second, let's just think about kind of why
That's
this stuff
absolutely
is so
fine.
important. It might be useful, it might be easier if you put yourselves on mute for this moment, if that's okay. And when we jump to the discussion, we can unmute our microphones so we can have a chat. But generative AI refers to a set of technologies that generate new content, such as text, images, and music, by learning from existing data sets that respond to prompts that you provide, whether that's a document you provide or a short comment or anything you've uploaded. It then generates this new way of kind of presenting that work or that insight. What's really fascinating about this is how quickly this is being adopted. And the slide in front of you shows that in just 10 months, it's reached this incredible kind of critical mass adoption, which, defined by Oliver Wyman, is 50% adoption in the US. It took just 10 months to get to that scale. Another way of looking at that fast pace of growth is how quickly these technologies are being used by hundreds of millions of users. So the mobile phone took 16 years to get to that stage. The internet took 7 years to get to that stage. Facebook, 4.5 years. In just 3 months, these generative AI tools have got to being used by 100 million users. Now, the reason for that, or one of the reasons for that, is they are consumer tools. That means they're available for anyone pretty much with the web or the internet to be able to use them at low or no cost. To have a really good version of a generative AI tool costs about $20 a month. So these are incredibly affordable all of a sudden, rather than housed within research labs. And that means more people can start using them and think about how to play with them. The other thing is that a class of technologies is often called general purpose technologies. That means they can be used across a whole range of different aspects. So whether you're using it for work life or organizing shopping lists, creating something like music for the weekend, or doing some deep dive reading into some kind of research for work. Their general purpose means they can be used across a whole range of contexts. The consumer technology means many people can access them. We've seen this incredible rate of growth. That's why there's so much interest in these at the moment, how quickly people are beginning to use, adopt, or explore them. So there's also really significant investment in these tools. We looked at 360 Giving, which some of you will know kind of publishes open grants data about grants being given to the charity sector. When we brought together all of the funding from grant makers going into charity digital work, it was less than 1/3 of 1% of all the investment going into commercial AI at the moment. So for all digital work across the sector, less than 1/3 of 1% of the investment going into generative AI within the commercial sector. So the investment is huge, the speed of adoption is huge, and the wide range of uses are huge. But it's not just about kind of the speed of this. In 1982, a senior executive at Hewlett-Packard coined this term once per decade disruptions. What that refers to is every 10 years or so, the dominant model of technology interaction kind of changes really significantly. So if you think kind of mainframes where we had kind of 4 universities had them, to PCs that most offices had, to now laptops that everyone's got, to the internet where we're all connected, to the mobile phone where we're connected wherever we are. These really big changes happen once every 10 years or so. Now, it's not just the change in how we use computers, but these changes fundamentally change how we think about problems, how we think about communicating with one another, accessing resources, even how we think about forming organizations and responses to challenges in front of us. The dominant model of technology influences the way in which we think about the world around us. So not only are we seeing this incredible speed of these new technologies, these once per decade disruptions are going to change the way in which we think about work and workforce, think about how we connect and communicate, even what we mean by knowledge. Some really big kind of fundamental changes that happen every 10 years or so. And we're at the very start of this next wave. It's an incredibly exciting place to be, but also a place for us to rethink about our responsibilities as organizations to make sure civic voice and civil society are at the heart of this next revolution. Now, whilst I say that this is already we're at the start of the wave, there's unquestionably already lots and lots of impact of these technologies on society around us. I'm going to give you 2, just to give you a flavour. The first is from a marketplace called Upwork. It's an online community where people can post jobs and or apply for kind of short-term work or smaller chunks of work. It's a huge marketplace with millions of jobs posted each year, millions of people accessing work through it. What they've noticed through their work is some of those entry-level roles. Can you create a draft of this? Can you copyright this? Can you do this first range of images? Those sorts of small roles are almost disappearing in many segments. And there's a greater priority on those more complex tasks that require real expertise and experience. Now, that's not happening across all segments of work, and we don't yet know the implications for our sector. But some of those early level, entry level roles are now being done by generative AI rather than being given to entry level roles or early career workers. However, we still see those important roles, people who are more experienced, who have a deeper understanding of their sector and their setting to complete those tasks. And then very much focus on the sector. Plinth is a tool that supports grant seekers to write grant applications more quickly. It will take the application form and the criteria from a Trust and Foundation website. It will take information from a charity's website and the Charity Commission, and then respond to prompts such as uploading a previous application form. And very quickly, it will create a first version of an application. It will then give a RAG rating that says how well your entry responds to the criteria of the Trust and Foundation. Sounds incredible, saving huge amounts of time. A few weeks ago, Plinth put a job advert on LinkedIn that said, we're looking for a grant writer to come and join our team, but don't apply unless you can write 75 applications in one day. Now, it turns out this wasn't really a job application. It was a way for them to kind of show off what their tools can do. They can write that many applications way beyond human capability. But as we think about these new tools, what might our response be? Might it be excitement that we can help people who can't afford grant writers to be able to create better applications more quickly? Does it fill you with concern? You might be receiving 75 applications in one day. Does it make you think about how you might use tools to respond to those applications and think about how you might then kind of do that first sift using automated tools rather than having to grow your team? However, the response to that question, we have the same question across all other aspects of our work, where generative AI tools might become being used. How might we respond to them? And one way of thinking about it is this term from Benedict Evans, which is generative AI is like having unlimited interns. So if you think about an intern who is incredibly well-read, who can be incredibly creative, but doesn't really know your context or your work, doesn't really kind of understand your deep understanding of the intentions or the mission of your organization. And just like an intern, when you ask it to do a role, ask them to do a role, what comes back, it'll be your responsibility to check, to make sure you're happy with the product, but also your responsibility to help improve that intern so they can get better to support you in your work. And I'd love you to hold on to that metaphor. What would it look like to have an unlimited interns or have an intern next to you to help you in your work? What tasks or jobs would you ask them to do? Now, when we're thinking about that, there's one more thing I'd like to share before we kind of dive into some shared work. We've had thousands and thousands of conversations with social impact organizations about the role of AI and their response. And we often have 4 different kind of types of conversations, often at the same time. So I just wanted to call them out to make sure we can have a really productive session today. So starting at the bottom, the first is, how might we use these interns or these tools to help us streamline and be more efficient in our work? How can we very quickly do a first draft of a scoping review? How can we very quickly write that blog post, that first draft very, very quickly? How can we kind of save huge amounts of time doing that sort of work? At Cast, our team have been tasked with trying to find 20% efficiencies in their work using AI so we can spend more time with our communities, friends, and family. How might we find more efficiencies to focus on the things that are important to us? The next level, though, says, what are the new ways in which we can work because we have these tools? How else might we bring about our mission? So if the first efficiency is we can write grant applications or review grant applications incredibly quickly using these tools, we might then say at this level, well, to really find the best organizations to support, maybe the grant application process doesn't work if it's a computer writing and marking its own homework. How else might we find the organizations that we want to support and spend more time building relationships with them? And in that instance, we shift some of the things that we're doing to be more effective in achieving our mission because we can rely on some of these tools. At the next stage, we think about how AI might be changing our mission or our sector. Now, that might be that we can use these tools so we see a reduction in workforce. It might be we have more time to build stronger relationships. It might be that because we can use some of these tools to do things, we can focus more on the relationships with other organizations and more time learning and sharing with each other. But the way in which we achieve our mission or the sector in which we operate might be changing because of these new tools. And then finally, how are these new tools changing the economic or social cultural environment in which we operate? How do these change the nature of work, the nature of workforce? If we follow that intern one all the way through, we might say, how can we use an intern to be more efficient? If we've got unlimited interns, how might we use our time to build more relationships? If we think about how we help young people into work, we might say, well, our mission needs to change to help them understand how to work alongside these tools, or provide new training programs around AI for young people to help them be work ready. Or at that top level, it might be, if the changing nature of workforce changes, how might we support young people to be more comfortable working in an environment where there are fewer jobs or fewer different sorts of jobs? Now, the reason for sharing those different levels is it's difficult to have a conversation about how we can save some time on a Friday by finishing a report more quickly, at the same time that someone's really concerned about the ethics or the data biases that these systems are trained upon. They're both really important conversations, and they're important conversations across each of these levels. So as we're having these conversations, let's think really carefully, where are we kind of focusing our time? Are we thinking about efficiencies, change and opportunities? Are we kind of worried about global trends driven by these technologies? So with all that in mind, we asked the sector at the beginning of this year kind of their response to AI, how they were feeling about AI within their working life. We had about 160 individuals responding. And as you can see from here, there's quite a lot of kind of excitement, more excitement than concern. Lots of people thinking these could be really beneficial, and already quite high adoption, over half those who responded, and 20% more looking to start using these tools already. Some of it for quite simple things like creating and editing first content, transcribing and spell checks. But already there's a big drive of organizations and individuals who are interested in this stuff. Mostly people who sign up to sessions like this who want to understand this stuff more are taking that back into their organizations. When we look at kind of the challenges, very few organizations have policies in place to understand how these tools can be used and shouldn't be used. Many were concerned about collecting data and what that means for their beneficiaries, but very few were really beginning to understand the implications for their communities. Very few felt most felt there was lack of training and support, and then lots of them felt kind of lack of support more generally to really understand how to harness and to respond to these tools. So lots there. There are lots and lots of specific things that came through, kind of requests for trusts and foundations and for funders. We're not going to spend time on these today. So I'm going to share this deck at the end of this. I'm sure Grace and Ora can help with that, so that you've got all these to look into. But this survey kind of reflects back what are the things that charities are looking for in terms of support to help them explore this stuff. And no doubt, some of it will be the same for us as we go back into our own organizations today. What's the kind of support that we're looking for? A quick whistle stop into something that's absolutely huge. Let's stop me kind of talking to you all over for a moment. Tori wonderfully is going to put the Miro link into the chat. And so Miro, I hope many of you are familiar with, is an online whiteboard. If you have challenges kind of using this, please put a message in the chat and we'll kind of respond to you. But what I'd love you to do, please, is spend a few minutes looking at these few questions. Have a think about kind of what you're happy contributing. Ideally, grab a post note from the bottom of the Miro board that's the right color. I'd love you to share, like, what's your interest in this stuff? It could be personal, it could be professional. Like, why are you interested in this? Green, what's your experience of using AI? Again, it could be personal, it could be professional. Is there anything that you are doing that you would like to share with this group? One of the things we've realized with the scale and speed of this technology and kind of the impact of its emergence is as a sector, we're only going to respond to this stuff positively if we keep sharing our learning together, such as the wonderful Festival of Learning. So is there anything specific you'd like to share that you're learning, that you're exploring? Is there anything you would want from other people to come and help you with? And then finally, the magic wand is, if resource and time and funding were no concern at all, you had a magic wish, what would you like to do? What would really help you understand or explore this stuff in more detail, whether that's for you specifically, for the organizations that you support and work with, or more broadly for society? So Tori, have you been able to share the mirror link? Thank you so much. Can I ask you all then to jump in? I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Please dive into the mirror link, start adding in those post notes. Any concerns, please put them in the chat box. And let's just do this for 4 minutes, please. That's like a minute per one. Put as many as you like. And let's see how we come together as a whole group. Thank you so much. Amazing, thank you. Something so lovely about seeing so many cursors flying around the screen. It feels like it should be so productive. If you've had a chance to write something, can I ask you just to spend a few minutes just kind of looking at other people's comments too? See if there's anything that resonates with you, anything that answers your question or adds complexity to what you've written. Just have a look and see if there's anything kind of similar or very, very different on the board from the thing that you've written, please. Okay, thank you. If you move slightly to the right-hand side of that screen, if it's just scroll to one side, you'll see that I've just added in a great big blue box a summary of the 25 key points that have emerged from that board so far. I haven't read anything that you've written so far. What I've done is I've asked Miro Assist, which is a little kind of box of stars at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, to create a summary. In a second, I'm going to lock it down so it can't be moved too much. But one of the things that we would use this for is to say, is there a way in which we can quickly kind of aggregate all of the contributions in one board and then share it back to the group and say, does that represent the conversations we've just been having? Do you feel represented in that text? Is there anything missing we should add? If not, then we've got a document of that part of the session. If we have, if there are things missing, let's build on it a bit further. And there's something there about I can very quickly create a product and output of that board without really engaging with it. Don't really want to do that. What I really want to do is engage with your contributions to understand where you're coming from and what your experience is. So we can shift away the documentation part because that can be done quite quickly. And perhaps we can now focus on the learning together. Before we jump into kind of some of the experiments that might respond to these points, what I'd love to do is just open up the chat for a moment and say, is there anything that anyone would like to kind of just call out from what they've just seen on, or what perhaps something you've contributed or something you've noticed? Is there anything you'd like to bring attention to the whole group? I wonder if the easiest way to do that is if you either kind of raise your hand using the Zoom window, and we'll try and come to you, or if you prefer, put something in the chat box and I can kind of bring you in that way. Anything that anyone would like to share? Let's go for Paulina.
Hi, this is extremely useful and really, really interesting as well. I think the thing that I've been noticing in myself as well, that we get into this slightly kind of arms race way of thinking of, oh, we should use AI to improve our existing grant management processes, and that we should train potential grantees to use AI to apply to interact with our grant management services. And it's this, like I said, it's kind of like an arms race where we just all continuing to use more and more processes, but using the same template, whereas it feels like we need to move up a level into that purple kind of area of your, whatever that diagram was, and think about how we can change the entire grant making process in line with the existence of AI, because I don't think we need to have the same application kind of pathways as we used to have before.
That's a great intention. Thank you so much. You're right. There's so much, isn't there, that helps us think how else might we, how would we redesign the way in which we find the best organizations to support if these tools were stable and we were familiar with them. Thank you for that. That's great. Ewan.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. Let me just shift this a second. That'll work better, hopefully. Yeah. So I think I'm the deep skeptic in the room. And I haven't touched it because it terrifies me. I am deeply concerned about what you were saying about entry-level jobs. I'm like, I've got members of staff that I'm trying to kind of bring up and kind of build in terms of like experience of grant making processes and so on and so forth. And my current view of this is like, actually, I don't see how it's going to help me. So what do you say? What does everybody else in the room say to me as somebody who's like, I don't want to touch this with a barge pole? And that's why I'm here, because I'm like, I think I'm going to be forced to do this. So how do I make this a positive experience?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for reading that, because I think everyone, or many people often have that view, at least at some point. So thank you for sharing it. I think there's an opportunity to think about what are the things that you don't like doing at work that you would give to an intern if you could, so that you can focus on other things that are more important. I think that intern is a really useful kind of metaphor to hold on to, What are the small tasks or big tasks you would ask them to so you can focus on the things that you love doing? That might be like not having to write that report so you can spend more time engaging with people. Or it might be like you can provide a coach to the staff you're looking to support so you can then have deeper conversations with them about their learning in progress. For me, there are lots of opportunities for us to explore kind of the benefits of this, but we must hold on to that critical challenge about how useful these are, how challenging they could be, both long-term and short-term. But if there's one thing that I would leave kind of this part of the conversation with, it's we desperately need civil society organizations to have a loud voice in how AI impacts our communities. And we're only going to do that if we understand how they work. And we're only going to get that by experimenting with them safely, even if it's just within closed meetings or in internal sessions. Only when we understand how they use and the potential impact do we understand what the potential implications might be, and only then can we really champion the needs of those who are here to support. And you, and I think we definitely need your voice in that. That's why I'd encourage you to start playing. Right, I think that's all the hands up for the moment. So let's move on. And some great comments in the chat. So thank you. Please do keep on chatting in there if you would like. Right, I'm going to share my screen once more. And in a few moments, I'm going to introduce you to the Director of Grants at Trust for London to talk through one of the experiments that they're doing there. But before I do that, let me just see if I can do this once more.
Hi, I wanted to raise a point.
Yeah, please.
Hi, I actually would have raised my hand, but for some reason I'm not seeing that button on Zoom, so sorry for interrupting.
No, it's wonderful.
Yes, so one point I saw in the chat, or rather this whole discussion, was the need to protect human interns while we progress with using AI in our work. And this especially hits home for me since I'm an intern myself too, and I do know for a fact that yes, AI can indeed do lots of the tasks that I do, and with a more consistent quality than myself sometimes. I think funders should, on this note, commission some research on this whole angle of just how replaceable are interns when it comes to AI. Because, there are so many angles to look at it. There is one angle, which is the economic quantification of the impact. There is another angle, which is how to incorporate AI whilst also having human interns. Because, again, of course, AI can save human interns' efforts, but then what do human interns do when their work becomes more efficient? Because, again, a lot of charities and grantees for funders out there, they are resource constrained as well. So there shouldn't be a situation that this balance of using artificial interns and human interns is not maintained well, because it's just a lose-lose situation per se.
Yeah.
So yes, that's the point I wanted to make.
And that's a wonderful point. Thank you. You're right. There's one description, which is we lose the role of the intern. The other is we rethink what that role might be. That work from the slide I shared with the up work said we need people who are more experienced, who understand the context and the mission of the organization to be able to then support the future interns. So our role then becomes, how do we help people get to that level by providing other sorts of engagement? How can we support human interns to develop greater relationships or understand the mission of the organization? How can they use AI to do some of the work they currently are asked to do? And how can we kind of really focus on building the greater capacity? And if we can create more efficiencies, how to spend more time bringing about the mission of our organization? That said, that's driven in so many ways by the economic model that underpins our organizations. If we were ruthless capitalists, we would say, how can we reduce the number of interns, reduce the number of the workforce, and increase outreach? That's not our primary motivation within this sector, but how do we ensure that all the efficiencies and the benefits of these tools are felt by our whole team and our whole communities? And that's a strategic and, frankly, a financial decision to make. Okay, thank you so much. So one of the points I made earlier on is that this is such a really fast growing pace, hugely kind of high growth kind of shift. And it's the tools that we're using are changing all the time. It's really fast paced. Because of that, it's quite difficult to create policies for these general purpose technologies because they sit across so many things. It's also difficult to kind of choose a tool and really go deep in training on that tool, because every few weeks or so another version emerges that's completely different or even better. So rather than thinking about kind of big solid policies or choosing a tool and learning and kind of training on it, we take an experimental approach, which is how can we test out different tools and different ways of working in safe ways. Now, there are lots of different kind of examples that we could share. Just to give two to have in mind for this next session. First, we have something called Sidekick at Cast, which is trained on all of our published materials of Cast and our partner Catalyst, which helps charities develop their digital data and design capabilities. We used to have an ambition, a rather arrogant ambition, that as we train charities, we wanted to support them to the extent that we would want to employ them in Cast. Now we're thinking, how do we ensure that everyone can have almost a Cast member of the team sat alongside them as they're doing their work? Now, we're nowhere near ready to share that completely. We're nowhere near to give that to every charity in the country. But there's an experiment there to say, how can we develop this tool to be confident that it's providing the right responses, using the right information, and is genuinely supportive to charities across the UK? Another version of that has that information to the Cast and the Catalyst materials, but also information from NCVO, published information for NCVO and the Charity Commission on how to be a good trustee. And that's because we know there are not enough trustees in charities who have really deep digital experience. So how can we create a board bot or a board buddy that sits alongside trustees to help them have that digital expertise as they prepare for and participate in board meetings? Again, we're not ready to share that more widely yet, but the ambition there is how we provide some further support to people at bigger scale than we ever could as a small organisation. As we go through this, we think about our experimental framework. So what's the thing that we're going to use to make sure we're being very safe, very mindful about the implications and what we're really learning from this? Rather than going into too much detail, I'd just like to pull out a few boxes that are particularly important. So the first box is boundaries of the experiment. So we haven't taken Sidekick or Board Boost and given it to every charity yet because it's nowhere near ready. But we are happy to test it internally with our staff team. It might be you say, I'm going to try something new, but actually it's only for 2 people in the team. It might be only for one part of our organisation or only for 1 week. But putting those boundaries around it means being thoughtful about how we're ensuring it's safe and it's focused on learning how to use these tools and the benefits and implications of them rather than going straight for scale. The second is person in the loop. That's a very strange way of saying, what's the role of the human when we're using AI? Because we will remain accountable and responsible for people who interact with these tools that we're using. So in that case, is it that we're using Sidekick to give to every charity? Is it we're using Sidekick to have everyone in Cast kind of up to speed before they give advice, and it's just their way of providing them coaching? Is it a coach we provide to digital leads, and then we meet them every other week to check in on those conversations they've had with this bot we've put together? But thinking about that role to ensure we're being responsible, accountable, and that we're supporting those who are interacting with these tools is a really important part. Data and privacy, of course, is a whole another kind of PhD thesis on its own. How we're being mindful about where the data is going, what data is being trained on. At the moment, most of our experiments are only using published information, things that we've already put out into the world. It's a whole different set of experiments if we're using something from grantees or something that's in our shared drive. Because we need to be mindful about what information we're uploading to these services. That's why that top right one that says tools used is we privilege trying to find community-owned or sector-owned technologies first. Can we find social enterprises or charities who are already doing this stuff and use their tools rather than just the dominant models that are VC-backed? And then finally, really crucially, is engagement. How do we ensure that anyone who are engaging with this work, we're bringing them in either as to engage with, to communicate with, to co-design with, make sure everyone's aware of the tests that we're doing. Now, that sounds all really grand. This is just a quick thought experiment to make sure we're covering our bases before we do something even small internally. Having that experimental mindset, so that how can we begin to develop our knowledge a bit further is what we're trying to do. And so, just to show kind of how that might work in practice, I would love to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Alex, who's Director of Grants at Trust for London, and has been playing with and making the migration sidekick at Trust for London. So I'll stop sharing. Alex, I didn't ask if you wanted to share anything or whether you just want to open up your microphone and start talking through what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. I might share my screen at the end, but I thought I'd begin by just kind of setting out the bit of the journey that we've been on that I think will talk back to some of the points that you've just raised. And I suppose our starting point, I think, was informed by some of that skepticism that's been raised today. And so I think we just acknowledged that AI was going to be playing a larger role, both in philanthropy, but also across civil society. And I suppose we just felt ill-equipped to kind of respond to that. We knew partners would be using it, but we didn't feel well placed to kind of advise them on the benefits of particular tools or how it could be used to enhance their work, or what might be some of the risks or consequences of it. So I suppose we really wanted to dive into the tools and experiment with them so that we could then develop a policy so that when we spoke about the use of AI, we spoke from an informed kind of perspective. So that was kind of the rationale for doing this work. I should just say, which also speaks to the kind of point around job displacement. AI is also, we're going to launch our new strategy in early June, and AI features within our new strategy under our work focus. And so we're interested in the context of how AI will affect our mission and the work that we want to do, particularly how AI is transforming jobs and working conditions. And we want to ensure the introduction of technology and AI in the workplace is informed by the experience of low-paid workers. So there's a kind of how AI is being used across civil society, but then there is the role of AI generally in the workplace. And so we're thinking about this from both perspectives. So in relation to the first kind of stream of thought around how AI will be used in philanthropy and across civil society, we put together a little working group at Trust for London, and that working group includes people from across the whole trust. So all kinds of different functions. We have someone from our finance team, someone from our human resources team, someone from our grants administrator team, as well as someone from our grants team and our social investment team. And that felt really important because I think we recognize that AI wasn't just something that our grant managers would be using, and enthusiasm across our grant managers is quite high about how they could use this tool to kind of increase their policy knowledge and free up time to kind of build better and stronger relationships with their funded partners. But then across other functions in the trust, there was different levels of enthusiasm. So some people were really skeptical and were probably worried about how AI might be coming in and being used to deliver functions that they would typically deliver themselves. So I think that's why we were really conscious we needed people from across the trust. And in terms of the boundaries of the experiments that Dan just spoke to, we only set up experiments that only use publicly available documents. So we are not confident yet to upload data from funded partners or grantees into an AI tool because we're still not sure where that might be used to kind of inform query responses by third-party providers. We started off our first experiment focused on creating efficiency. So like what was a really easy early entry tool that we could experiment using that would benefit everybody from across the whole team. So we've been playing about with Fathom, which is a note-taking tool, mainly to free up time for people to kind of focus on more substantial or interesting work. So we used to, for example, we have monthly staff team meetings, and we used to have a rota of different staff members in the trust who was responsible for creating minutes every month for those staff meetings. We no longer do that. We now use Fathom to create those minutes and those summaries. But I should note, we have set up a rule that says we can only use Fathom to create minutes for those internal meetings that don't have decisions in them, because I think we are still a little bit worried about the kind of the accuracy of the transcripts of Fathom, particularly when you're making decisions around kind of complex matters. So we're only using it for those kind of meetings, internal meetings, or people are using it as an aid memoir so that they can still generate their own set of minutes. So that was kind of our first experiment. And then the second experiment was around using ChatGPT to support internal staff learning. So in our structure, we have different different grant managers who are responsible for different thematic areas across the trust. And some people are coming to those areas brand new and are wanting to learn more about that particular area. So for example, the individual who's taken over our migration portfolio is new to that field. So we've created what Dan set out was what we have called a migration sidekick, which was basically trained on our strategy and our theory of change and our analysis of the main drivers of poverty and destitution where migration played a factor. to create this chat GPT, this custom chat GPT that individual member of staff could say, okay, I'm going to this meeting that's focused on this particular topic. What are the 5 headlines that I should know before I go into that meeting to help me prepare? That content that is generated is then checked in with other staff members to make sure that it's giving them kind of good, accurate data. And I should also note that we have seen when that ChatGPT has provided responses, it's been around, 80 to 90% accurate. So one of the things that we asked this ChatGPT, and I'll share my screen in a moment, was, outline 10 or 12 organizations that I should go out and speak to kind of increase my understanding in this area of migrant destitution. And in the kind of list of 12, it created one organization that doesn't exist. I think it's actually based its response on a conference that took place 2 years ago. So, there are checking the accuracy of the responses is really, really important. We're also looking at creating another custom GPT that will be able to kind of track back through minutes of meetings to kind of when we want to search for a particular decision and when that decision was made, we can use a custom GPT to say, I know we made a decision to grant this organization funding. Tell us when that decision was taken and the parameters of that decision. So using it as a kind of an effective search tool for minutes of meetings is something that we're now experimenting with. And then I think the following experiment, which we've just started to speak to Dan about, is I think there's real interest in how you can use an AI tool to kind of analyze a large number of grantee reports to kind of understand whether there are kind of trends or themes that are emerging from the entirety of this kind of cohort of reports. We're not yet confident to do that because, when we ask funded partners to give us reports, we encourage them to share their learning, the positive and the negative. And there's kind of a confidentiality. There's no expectation that that data would be shared and kind of used to upload to an AI platform. So we really don't want to be sharing that data with third-party companies or corporations. So we're looking at whether we can create a custom AI language model that we would be sure that that data would not go any further than ourselves and the provider. We're speaking to CAST about how we might create that so that we can kind of analyze that data, feeling very safe that no other third-party corporation would have access to that data to then be able to analyze it. We're also interested in Copilot to kind of, again, support our internal learning. But I think we're really, again, making sure that there's quite a lot of thought and configuration that has to go into adopting that to make sure that it only draws on particular documents to inform responses. So that needs quite careful thought and configuration. But ultimately, at the end of this process, and we're setting out about 6 or 7 months of this process, we want to create an AI policy internally, which will determine how we use it and where we were happy to use it and where we're not so comfortable in using it, but also to help us to kind of support our funded partners. If they need an AI policy, we will have a template that we can draw on. And we can also feel confident where we are encouraging people to make use of it and where we also continue to be skeptical of AI use in particular circumstances, but feel like that will come from a place of knowledge rather than kind of just reading about it and its adoption. I'm conscious of time, Dan. Would it be helpful for me to very quickly share my screen, or is that kind of intro kind of enough around where we are and what we're using?
Amazing overview, Alex. Can you do a 30? No, I tell you what, let's pause it. Can you just describe how quickly it took to create that, say, the first migration cycle? What kind of amount of time did that take? Because it sounds incredible.
It took about 30 to 40 minutes to create, but I've got to say, like, Dan helped us create it. It wasn't me doing it by myself. So I think if I was doing it by myself, it might have taken a little bit longer. We have then created another one by ourselves, which I think maybe wasn't quite as effective in the instruction of the development of it, that the responses aren't as good as the one that you helped us develop.
Thank you, Alex. Let's pause there just for time. That was amazing. Thank you. What Alex has just described there in terms of all those different experiments, some of them, I mean, they just sound incredible, kind of the scale of what you're doing, got all that information that's being brought in. But some of the actions we do to be able to harness these tools are quite small, so long as we then put them within a kind of testing framework. We're heading towards time. If there are specific questions for Alex, can I ask you please to put them in the chat? Also, you'll notice on the mirror board, I put just on the right-hand side of that summary, a whole set of new post-it notes. If there are any actions that you would like to take from this session, or if there's any support you would like, or any further conversations, can I ask you to write them on those yellow post-it notes, either now or after the session? If there's a direct response that you would like, please put in your name or your email address so we can make sure we can follow up. And that's just a chance to say, today has been a super, super quick kind of run through. It's incredible kind of new wave of technologies, the opportunities and the challenges. So we haven't had much time to kind of really dive into detailed conversations together. It's just that starting point. But what I'd love to do is just kind of share my screen for the final time, which should look something like this. So if you can go to the mirror board and think about those kind of priorities or those actions for next steps. What is it that might help you kind of take this further? There's also then an offer. So we currently support a peer group of people working in trust and foundations. We currently have 65 trust and foundations with about 110 people, a subset of which come together every 2 months or so to talk about this stuff in a bit more detail and to move from these kind of high level conversations into like, what can we practically do? If you'd be interested in joining that group, it's a free open access group where we just come together and kind of facilitate it together. Please email me. My email address is at the bottom of that screen. And that's a group just for people working in trust and foundations to explore the role of AI in your work, in your influence, and supporting the communities that you do. Quick call out for our colleagues who are running a session tomorrow, between 1 and 2, which is thinking about kind of more grantee feedback and telling us about current state of funding practices. We incubate a tool called Grant Advisor, which is a free tool to collect anonymous feedback about grant making practices. We're also exploring kind of what's the role of AI in that piece of work too. But there's another great session tomorrow if you'd like to join. And then finally, a subset of that peer group are coming together to think specifically about how do we support charities and those within our community to understand how to respond to AI and its implications. There are no commitments from anyone at the moment. This is a group specifically thinking about how to design and then deliver support to the sector. If your interest isn't covered by that peer group or this kind of subset, or the Grant Advisor session tomorrow, then please do put a comment in the mirror board or in the chat. If you want us to follow up, please leave your name and your email address. Where I'd like to end, to make sure we are on time, is as we look at this kind of wave of technologies, it is unquestionably kind of this once per decade disruption. It's going to shift across all those levels of that egg or that oval or whatever we're going to call it. If we're going to ensure it works for everyone, we need to ensure we have an empowered, vocal and influential civil society. Our role as trusts and foundations in supporting that is really critical. So we need to support one another to develop our confidence and understanding of how to use these tools, both internally, proficiency, more importantly, to ensure we have that influence beyond our sector to make sure these tools work for us all. Thank you so much for your time today. I know it's been an absolute whistle stop. I'm really looking forward to properly diving into the mirror board and reading it all through and looking at all the comments in the chat. But for now, I'll just say thank you and I'll hand you back to Grace.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. That was an excellent session. And thank you, Alex, for sharing as well. And I can see some of those chats are going in on the chat as well. So we'll send that across to you as well, Dan, so you can collate that with the Miro board. Huge thank you to everyone for coming. We have more festival sessions. As he said, we've got a session with Dan tomorrow as well on Fix the Form. We've just dropped the link to that in the chat. And we have our in-person festival finale on Thursday. And if any of you can make it, we'd love to celebrate the whole 2 weeks of learning with you as well. I will let you get on with your days, but thank you so much. And hopefully see you all at another event soon. Thank you. Bye.